Hello guys, okay, it's Sadie, and I have my first day of my new job in electronics, so I'll try to keep this brief because you know how I can ramble. So, what we are doing is um, we are as the coax cables that came out years ago, the 75 ohm cables that came out years ago, that they just had ABC, NBC, and CBS on, and then they moved to have cable TV on that. As those branched out from the big cities, they will lose there's losses due to that length of cable. So we have to have cable amplifiers. So what I work on is cable line amplifiers. Many different companies make those, and we fix them. And they have a power supply, and they have a downstream and an upstream for the amplification. It's easier to get things downstream, the signal downstream, as many channels come downstream. And it's as we have a lot of multimedia stuff, there's the upstream to get signals back when you have on-demand things. So what happens is it branches out into networks, and it branches out into subdivisions and goes on into the boonies. They have to amplify that signal. It just can't keep going. It's a lot different than obviously with power. You have it's just the sine wave of the power, and it delivers the power, and there's losses in that, but it's not a signal. It's just that alternating current. So with the coax that we're all familiar with, the antennas, they have those boxes. Now, when you look at a power line, you'll see, or a telephone pole, you'll see the thick wires at the top are the from the substation, from the transformers, from the high tension lines, and those thick lines are usually like 17 to 20 kilovolts, and then they break down into the neighborhoods for power for 220 and 120, 220 and 240 and 120. So those lines on the thick lines on the top are the power lines. Then you go down a little bit, and that's where the telephone lines were. Telephone is being replaced. You'll see the thick single lines, and that's the cable lines. You'll see boxes that look like a tank. It looks almost like a Foreman grill that's silver, and the inside of it folded reverse, and it'll have the the coax going into it. Then it'll break off into that. So that signal has to be amplified. So most of them run on 60 volts AC. So you have that 60 volts AC through there, and then there's a little converter on the back that breaks it down into typically 24 volts or 12 volts. 24 is more common. The newer cable amplifiers are going to be up around 90 volts AC. So what that does is it has that cable TV signal, and all the cable stuff is riding on that wave of that electricity that powers it. So it will deliver it. To run the amplifier, we need 20 volts DC. So on the outside of it, there's a gain control and a slope. And what we do is we usually open it up, verify that the power supply is working. That's obviously the first thing you want to do. And then you want to check the gain pot and the slope pot. And then we just bring those down 3 decibels, which is half power, because the decibels, of course, we're working with the powers of 10, and that's the logarithmic scale. So to bring something down from 30 decibels to 27 sounds like you're just cutting off a little bit, but you're taking it down by half of the amount, because just like when you buy a stereo amplifier, they don't have the little pot adjustments. When you buy your car stereo amplifier, they don't have that maxed out. They usually have it kind of in the middle, So you can tweak it because, of course, there's more distortion as you crank it up. It's better to have a clean signal coming in and then use multiple amplifiers if you want it amplified much more. So we bring those down, check to see if those are working, and there's these things called hybrids, which when we say downstream, that's where the signal's coming from the cable TV or the I guess it would be from a satellite thing where it's beamed. So that's downstream. So it sounds like that's where it's faster to come downstream, and that's where the bulk of the data is coming through. These are usually operated at the downstream. I think it was like at 750 megahertz. This was an old one we were working on, and then the upstream I think was 50 megahertz. So we check those hybrids to make sure they're okay. Recap it. Mr. Carlson will be happy we recap the heck out of that. Mr. Carlson will be happy about that. Okay, so yeah, we got to recap it because you don't want a capacitor, as Mr. Carlson says, you don't want a capacitor failing, and we're not trying to get some juicy warm tone out of your cable TV like you would an old amplifier. So, so what we do is we check those hybrids, and they're just like kind of little boxes that I guess are amplifiers, and those will amplify the signal, and it's all in decibels. So as that signal comes in, it gets amplified, and you have the downstream and the upstream on that same coax, and that gets into MoCA, which is multimedia over cable, the coax. So in your house, you'll have the cable coming in with your internet. Well, we just call it internet on there, but it's streaming all those services. So you'll have a node, and that will break into your different rooms in your house, and that's where the upstream comes. When you order something on demand, that signal has to get up back to communicate to the main cable box or your DVR. So what we do is we basically, it was just my first day yesterday. So what we do is we want to check to make sure all that's working, and make sure that it can pass a signal forward through the unit and backwards. So they're just cable amplifiers. They've been made by many different companies. Then we service all of them, so you see newer ones. And basically, most of the things that cause damage to them are lightning, the cable techs not closing the boxes correctly, or leaving some dust or dirt or water in there. We don't blame the techs out in the field. It's a rough job. We're not blaming them. But mostly it's like lightning, water damage, people pulling on the trees, getting into the wires, or something like that. So we want to make sure that those caps work. We want to make sure the power supply works. Replace the hybrids, which are basically, as far as I can tell, amplifiers, and then it will go to QC, and they'll make sure that it's correct. So there's so much to learn. So this is not consumer electronics. I wouldn't really call it industrial electronics. So it's like communication electronics that cable companies use. And so my boss said we would eventually get into fiber, which will be, as those old lines get as they start spreading out more, they'll just phase out things. They just phase out things. They don't go through and rip out everything like they should with the lead pipes and the water. They should do that, but what they do is they try to clean them up and stuff like that. But you can, they're made out of materials. Materials are in the elements, and then they age, and then you could get, obviously fiber is so much more, like you could just do insane things with it. So it will be going on and on. I have so much to learn. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate it. Any comments you can give or advice, I appreciate it.